The bitter December cold of 1944 gripped the Ardennes forest like a vice. Snow blanketed everything in deceptive silence. But this quiet masked frantic preparations below. Germany was rolling the dice one final time. Adolf Hitler had unleashed his last desperate throw. The Ardennes offensive would soon earn its grim nickname. History knows it as the Battle of the Bulge. The plan was audacious to the point of madness: split the Allied forces, capture the vital port of Antwerp, force the Allies to negotiate on German terms. American troops had settled into what seemed like a sleepy front. Months of combat had worn them down. They expected nothing more than routine patrols. None imagined that within hours, Germany's most powerful armor would come crashing through the trees. The German gamble was staggering in its scope. Over 200,000 soldiers surged forward. Nearly 1,000 tanks and assault guns supported them. These weren't ordinary formations. Elite units spearheaded the attack. The 5th Panzer Army rolled like thunder. The 6th Panzer Army under SS command brought even more terror. Their machines were monsters of steel and fire. Panthers prowled the forest roads. The massive Tiger II dominated everything around it. These armored giants boasted protection up to 150 millimeters thick. Most Allied weapons couldn't even scratch that armor. German confidence ran high. This steel avalanche would crush everything. Winter weather would ground Allied planes. Surprise would do the rest. Swift breakthrough seemed guaranteed. American defenders faced a nightmare scenario. The Ardennes line stretched dangerously thin. Many units were green troops. Others were battle-weary veterans recovering. Supplies ran short. Morale wavered. The terrain made reinforcement nearly impossible. Yet hidden among the American weapons lay something unexpected. The 90mm M1 anti-aircraft gun waited in the snow. These weapons had been built for one purpose: shoot down high-flying German bombers. Their long barrels reached toward the sky. Advanced fire control systems tracked aerial targets. Nobody expected them to fire horizontally at tanks. December the 16th dawned gray and ominous. Heavy clouds blocked the sun. Allied aircraft stayed grounded. German armor moved like ghosts through the mist. Engines roared through the silent woods. American infantry fell back in panic. The thin defensive line bent under tremendous pressure. Desperate officers made desperate choices. They began moving the big guns. 90mm weapons swung down from their high mounts. Crews scrambled to prepare new positions. These guns would face German armor head-on. Innovation born of pure necessity was about to change everything. The Ardennes had become a killing ground. Doctrine meant nothing now. Engineering prowess would clash with raw courage. German tanks rolled forward confidently. Their crews believed nothing could stop them. American gunners sweated in frozen foxholes. Their weapons pointed at dark tree lines. Soon, armor would meet artillery in ways nobody had planned. This improvisation would rewrite the rules of war. Anti-aircraft guns against the finest tanks Germany ever built. The stage was set. Snow continued falling. Young soldiers on both sides prepared for battle. None knew they were about to witness something unprecedented. The 90mm gun would earn its place in history. Not shooting at bombers, not defending against air raids, but destroying the most feared tanks in the German arsenal. Hitler's last gamble was about to meet American ingenuity. American artillery designers never intended their creation for tank hunting. The 90mm M1 emerged from late 1930s drawing boards. Its mission was crystal clear: destroy high-altitude German bombers. The Heinkel He 111 and Junkers Ju 88 were the expected targets. By 1941, the weapon had proven its worth against aerial threats. Muzzle velocity exceeded 800 meters per second. A 15-kilogram shell could reach beyond 30,000 feet. Sophisticated radar systems guided the fire. Predictive computers calculated intercept courses. America's home defense relied on these guns. European deployment followed naturally. The 90mm accompanied divisions overseas. These weapons weren't exactly portable. Each gun weighed nearly 9 tons with its carriage. Heavy trucks hauled them into position. They appeared at supply depots and port facilities. Air raid protection was their sole mission. Few commanders considered ground targets, yet hidden potential lurked within the design. That long barrel promised tremendous penetration power. High-velocity rounds carried devastating energy. Standard American tank guns seemed feeble by comparison. The 75mm Sherman weapon looked almost toy-like. Even the improved 76mm variants couldn't match this firepower. Armor-piercing shells revealed shocking capabilities. Test firings demonstrated over 120 millimeters of penetration at 1,000 meters. This approached the protection levels of German Panthers. Such figures existed only in technical manuals. Battlefield application remained theoretical. Some units had experimented earlier. Italian campaigns of 1943 and 1944 saw occasional ground use. Bunkers crumbled under 90mm fire. Indirect bombardment devastated entrenched positions. After Normandy, scattered reports mentioned attacks on German strongpoints, but doctrine lagged behind innovation. German intelligence knew these guns existed. They dismissed them as air defense weapons only. Counter-tank planning focused elsewhere. Sherman tanks dominated their calculations. British 6-pounder and 17-pounder guns drew attention. Tank destroyers like the M10 worried them more. The M36 Jackson mounted the same 90mm gun. But these vehicles were specialized platforms. Germans expected them in dedicated anti-tank roles. Nobody imagined towed guns waiting in ambush. Static positions seemed unlikely. Road junctions appeared vulnerable only to air attack. This miscalculation would prove catastrophic. American forces possessed powerful weapons. German planning had ignored them completely. The Ardennes deployment was purely coincidental. Many guns sat near logistics hubs. German thrusts aimed at exactly these locations. Opportunity met necessity in the snow. Commanders seized the moment quickly. Batteries swung around toward approaching armor. Fire control equipment was stripped away. Armor-piercing ammunition rolled forward. Cumbersome transport meant careful positioning. Once emplaced, these guns controlled vast fields of fire. Aircraft tracking had trained these crews well. Moving bombers were difficult targets. Lumbering tanks seemed almost stationary by comparison. Range estimation became simpler. Lead calculations disappeared entirely. Direct fire replaced complex calculations. Technical superiority extended beyond pure firepower. High rates of fire maintained continuous pressure. Time-fused shells remained effective against infantry. A single battery could dominate entire villages. Crossroads fell under complete control. Both anti-tank fire and area bombardment came from one weapon. American troops had doubted their chances against heavy armor. Panthers and Tigers seemed invincible. Now they discovered effective countermeasures. Proper support could destroy any tank. This revelation spread through the ranks. Psychological impact was enormous. The darkest days suddenly seemed survivable. German armor represented the pinnacle of wartime engineering. The Ardennes offensive gathered the Reich's finest machines. These were the weapons that had terrorized Europe. American and British forces had learned to fear their power. Each represented years of development and combat experience. The Panther medium tank anchored German expectations. Its 75mm TWK 42L 70 gun was legendary. Accuracy at long range was unmatched. Penetration capabilities exceeded most Allied weapons. Sloped armor deflected incoming rounds. Frontal assaults by Sherman tanks ended in disaster. Tiger II tanks brought even more terror. Nearly 70 tons of armored might. Frontal protection reached 150 mm thickness. The 80mm QK-43 cannon destroyed targets beyond 2 kilometers. German crews were often Eastern Front veterans. Deep confidence filled their ranks. These machines had proven themselves repeatedly. The 1940 French campaign lived in memory. German armor had swept all opposition aside. Similar results seemed certain in the Ardennes. Supporting vehicles strengthened the formations. Panzer IV tanks remained numerous and reliable. Assault guns like the Stug 3 provided additional firepower. Jagdpanzer IV tank destroyers added long-range capability. Combined arms formations created armored wedges. These would smash through American lines. Key road junctions were the objectives. St. Vith and Bastogne topped the list. The Meuse River beckoned beyond. Allied logistics would crumble once severed. Terrain favored the attackers initially. Wooded hills channeled movement. Narrow roads led toward objectives. German planners believed speed would overcome obstacles. Allied reinforcements couldn't respond quickly enough. Psychological impact would be overwhelming. Reports from American infantry described earthquake-like trembling. German columns stretched for miles through the forest. Engines growled continuously through the snow. Belgian civilians witnessed endless convoys of Panthers. The sight was both magnificent and terrifying. King Tigers emerging from morning mist became nightmares. These machines seemed impervious to everything. Only concentrated artillery or air strikes could hurt them. Intelligence had warned of heavy armor concentrations. The actual scale still exceeded expectations. German doctrine emphasized breakthrough and exploitation. Panzer divisions would penetrate quickly. Encirclement would follow immediately. Racing westward would prevent counterattacks. Fuel shortages were acknowledged, but dismissed. Captured Allied depots would provide what was needed. Hitler himself reinforced this confidence. The first days seemed to prove him right. American positions crumbled under assault. Prisoners streamed toward the rear. German tanks surged into previously secure territory. Overconfidence became a fatal weakness. Tank commanders advanced without proper caution. They calculated only tank destroyers posed serious threats. Heavy artillery remained their primary concern. Anti-aircraft guns never entered their planning. Hidden along tree lines, these weapons waited silently. German tankers advanced with memories of past victories. Steel armor and battlefield experience seemed unbeatable. American adaptability was underestimated completely. Artillery versatility remained unconsidered. The assumption of enemy predictability would soon shatter. Long columns moved slowly through forest roads. Visibility dropped as snow intensified. Maneuvering became increasingly difficult. Choke points developed naturally. Traffic jams stretched for kilometers. These were precisely the moments when hidden guns could strike. American crews waited patiently behind their weapons. Some had never fired at ground targets. Training focused on high-altitude bombers. Tank hunting was completely new. Yet the principles remained similar. Steady aim and proper timing would decide everything. The German spearheads rolled forward confidently. Panther and Tiger crews expected easy victory. Their steel monsters had never failed them. Within hours, this confidence would meet devastating reality. American innovation was about to prove its worth. American commanders faced impossible decisions in the chaos. Standard doctrine offered no solutions for sudden armored breakthrough. Anti-tank guns like the 57mm and 75mm bounced off heavy German armor. Desperate situations demanded desperate measures. The decision to redeploy 90mm guns changed everything. These weren't designed for ground combat. Moving them required enormous effort. 9 tons of gun and carriage needed heavy transport. Snow-blocked roads complicated everything. Abandoned vehicles created additional obstacles. Gun crews showed remarkable adaptability despite limited training. High-altitude engagement was their specialty. Ground targets demanded completely different techniques. Complicated fire control systems were stripped away. Weight reduction allowed quicker repositioning. Manual aiming replaced automated tracking. Ammunition handlers performed miracles under pressure. Armor-piercing shells weren't normally stocked in quantity. Depot supplies had to be redirected immediately. Urgent demand exceeded all planning assumptions. Rounds were literally scavenged from other units. Field improvisation extended far beyond hardware modifications. Infantry and engineers collaborated on concealment. Gun positions needed perfect camouflage for surprise. Snow and foliage created deadly ambush sites. German armor would advance unsuspecting into kill zones. Training discipline transferred surprisingly well between missions. Bomber interception required precise timing. Tank engagement demanded similar skills. Moving aircraft were actually harder targets. Approaching armor moved predictably down narrow roads. Range estimation became much simpler. Visual acquisition was completely different. Sky searches were replaced by tree-line watching. Silhouettes emerged from forest shadows instead of clouds. Distance calculation used familiar landmarks. Lead angles disappeared entirely with slow-moving targets. Outstanding examples came from 2nd Armored Division support units. German forces pushed toward key Belgian villages. Officers ordered 90mm batteries to cover exposed flanks. Sherman tanks couldn't hold alone against concentrated assault. The big guns filled critical gaps in defensive planning. Positions were carefully chosen for maximum effectiveness. Crossroads offered perfect fields of fire. Stone walls provided both concealment and protection. Silent waiting became the primary tactic. German armor had to approach within optimal range. 1,000 meters gave the velocity needed for penetration. Reports described shells punching cleanly through turret armor. Fuel ignited immediately from penetrating hits. German tank crews abandoned vehicles they'd considered invulnerable. Machines that had terrorized Allied forces became burning wrecks. Not every deployment succeeded perfectly. Gun size made concealment extremely difficult. German artillery zeroed in once positions were revealed. Mortar fire followed immediately after engagement. Several crews suffered heavy casualties before relocating. The weapon's destructive power justified these risks. American tank destroyers carried the same gun system. M36 Jackson vehicles were specifically designed for this mission. Unfortunately, numbers remained insufficient for the broad front. Towed versions filled the gaps despite logistical difficulties. Mobility was sacrificed for availability. Defensive coordination evolved rapidly under battlefield pressure. Combined arms integration became essential for survival. Light weapons slowed German advances initially. Bazooka teams and mines channeled armor into predictable paths. This funneled targets toward the waiting big guns. Layered defense showed American tactical maturity. Sherman tanks engaged at maximum range first. Infantry weapons forced German infantry to seek cover. Engineers prepared obstacles at critical choke points. Artillery concentrated on the most dangerous threats. Weather conditions amplified the guns' effectiveness dramatically. Poor visibility restricted German maneuverability severely. Snow-laden forests created natural funnels for advancing armor. Roads became the only practical routes forward. Once blocked with wrecked vehicles, entire columns stalled completely. Traffic jams created lucrative targets for sustained bombardment. 90mm crews fired continuously during these opportunities. Every destroyed tank delayed the entire German advance. Time was the most precious commodity in the offensive. Each hour of delay brought Allied reinforcements closer. American officers trusted local initiative over rigid doctrine. Battalion and company commanders positioned guns where they seemed most effective. NCOs and gun captains made critical targeting decisions. This flexibility proved essential when situations changed rapidly. Key locations received priority for the heaviest weapons. Crossroads like Baraque de Fraiture became fortified strongpoints. Villages outside Bastogne gained additional firepower. Approaches to Saint-Vith were carefully covered. Single batteries could control entire sectors when properly positioned. Each destroyed German tank represented multiple victories. Immediate tactical success was only the beginning. Psychological impact on surviving crews was enormous. Logistical disruption affected entire formations. Strategic momentum slowed with every engagement. The transformation of air defense into tank killing demonstrated American adaptability. Improvisation became organized resistance under extreme pressure. Survival instincts evolved into coherent defensive systems. Innovation replaced doctrine when circumstances demanded change. First encounters between 90mm guns and German armor created shockwaves through both armies. December 17th and 18th brought the collision of expectations with reality. German tank columns advancing confidently through narrow forest roads met devastating surprises. Panzer crews expected only Sherman tanks and light anti-tank guns. Intelligence had assured them of American weapon limitations. The sight of their vaunted Panthers and Tiger IIs exploding in single hits was beyond comprehension. Flames erupted through thick armor that should have been impenetrable. Survivor accounts paint vivid pictures of these early clashes. Near Krinkelt and Rocherath, American gunners concealed 90mm pieces behind rubble and hedgerows. The 12th SS Panzer Division attacked with typical confidence. German armor forced passage through village streets. The guns opened fire at 700 to 900 meters. Shells struck Panther sides with devastating effect. Sloped armor that deflected lighter rounds was penetrated cleanly. Frontal hits at closer ranges punched through glacis plates. Supporting infantry dove for cover as burning wrecks blocked narrow roads. German officers, who had promised unstoppable advances, faced horrible reality. American firepower possessed unexpected capabilities. Panthers that had seemed invincible were reduced to smoking hulks. Crews that had survived Eastern Front battles died in Belgian snow. Similar scenes unfolded near Saint-Vith repeatedly. The 5th Panzer Army's armored spearheads collided with hastily reinforced defenses. 90mm guns had been rushed into position during the night. Battery commanders reported destroying 6 tanks in single engagements. Surviving German vehicles withdrew to regroup. Tank crews who had trained themselves to ignore lighter weapons began exercising extreme caution. Lingering in exposed positions became obviously suicidal. Smoke screens and artillery preparation became essential before advancing. American defenders received tremendous morale boosts from these encounters. Soldiers who had felt helpless against imposing German armor witnessed their destruction. Infantry huddled in frozen foxholes cheered as massive tanks ground to permanent halts. The sight of Tiger II turrets blown completely off their chassis was unforgettable. Crews bailing out into the snow provided proof of vulnerability. Word spread quickly through American ranks. These guns could stop the heaviest enemy armor. German units suffered equally significant psychological damage. Rumors circulated about secret American superweapons. Some believed the British had introduced experimental 17-pounder guns. Others suspected new prototypes rushed from American factories. The truth was simpler, but no less effective. Tank commanders, who had advanced confidently through supposedly lightly armed sectors, began proceeding with extreme caution. The momentum that the Ardennes plan desperately required started slipping away. Every cautious approach meant precious time lost. Battlefield evidence was undeniable and terrifying. Forest roads became graveyards of German armor. Some hulks continued smoldering beneath falling snow. American engineers used these wrecks as improvised roadblocks. Further delays were guaranteed for following columns. German prisoners expressed complete astonishment during interrogation. They had never expected such effective ground fire from anti-aircraft units. The psychological impact was enormous. Weapons they had dismissed as irrelevant became their worst nightmare. What had begun as desperate improvisation quickly became standard defensive procedure. Every location with 90mm guns available received immediate deployment orders. The pattern was replicated wherever American forces could establish defensive positions. These first shock encounters marked a critical turning point. They didn't halt the offensive immediately, but they demonstrated conclusively that German spearheads weren't invincible. The myth of unstoppable panzers began cracking under American ingenuity. Every subsequent clash carried memories of these initial encounters. German tankers advanced, knowing their armor could be penetrated. American gunners gained confidence with each successful engagement. The balance of psychological warfare shifted dramatically. Roads littered with destroyed German vehicles told their own story. Panthers and Tigers weren't invulnerable after all. Proper weapons and good positioning could destroy them. American adaptability had found the key to German armor. The battle continued, but its character had changed completely. Cautious advances replaced confident assaults. American resistance stiffened with every passing hour. The 90mm gun had announced its presence in ground warfare. Both armies would remember these first deadly encounters. December's deepening snow witnessed the Ardennes transforming into an endurance contest. German plans depended on swift breakthrough and rapid exploitation. Stubborn American resistance at critical points changed everything. Villages and crossroads became anchors that disrupted the entire timetable. Bastogne, St. Vith, and smaller hamlets gained legendary status. American units held them long enough to deny German objectives. 90mm guns played crucial roles in stiffening these defensive positions. Armored support was thin, but heavy artillery filled the gaps. The 7th Armored Division faced repeated assaults near St. Vith. The 5th Panzer Army hammered their positions continuously. Terrain bottlenecks forced German armor into predictable avenues of approach. American commanders deployed 90mm batteries to cover likely attack routes. Reports from this period highlight devastating effectiveness. Guns emplaced on ridges dominated valley approaches. Others hid behind road embankments, creating perfect ambush positions. Multiple vehicles were destroyed before German forces could react effectively. St. Vith itself became a week-long delaying action. Each day gained allowed reinforcements to converge from north and south. The noose gradually tightened around German advance elements. Every hour of resistance multiplied the strategic benefits. Bastogne's defense involved more than just airborne troops. The 101st Airborne Division held the town center. Surrounding artillery units provided critical anti-armor firepower. 90mm guns were dug into frozen fields around the perimeter. Snow concealment made these positions nearly invisible. Open approaches were covered completely by interlocking fire zones. German attempts at encirclement met devastating long-range bombardment. Paratrooper accounts described cheering as shells tore into approaching armor. The ring of defense held despite enormous pressure. Tank attacks that might have succeeded were repelled by concentrated firepower. The 90mm guns proved their worth repeatedly during the siege. The 2nd Armored Division used these weapons to plug critical gaps. Retreating infantry units left dangerous openings in defensive lines. Villages like Sels and Hotten became contested battlegrounds. 90mm fire helped repel assaults that threatened flanking maneuvers. Limited numbers of these guns magnified their impact significantly. A single battery positioned properly could command entire roads or valleys. German forces faced difficult choices repeatedly. Overwhelming force meant costly delays. Alternate routes were usually impossible in winter terrain. Holding defensive lines required more than firepower alone. Coordination between different units became essential for survival. Communications linked artillery, infantry, and engineers in mutual support. 90mm guns worked alongside mines, bazooka teams, and Sherman tanks. Layered defense emerged from battlefield necessity. Light weapons initiated contact and slowed German advances. This forced armor into predictable movement patterns. Heavy guns waited at positions where maximum damage was possible. American combined arms tactics matured rapidly under extreme pressure. Improvisation evolved into coherent defensive systems. Local commanders learned to integrate available resources effectively. No single weapon type carried the entire burden. Weather conditions continued favoring defensive operations. Poor visibility restricted German maneuverability severely. Snow-covered forests channeled movement into narrow corridors. Roads became the only practical routes for heavy armor. Once these routes were blocked with destroyed vehicles, entire columns stalled immediately. Traffic jams created opportunities for sustained bombardment. 90mm crews maintained continuous fire during these engagements. Every tank destroyed meant further delays for following units. German timetables had assumed rapid movement through American positions. Reality proved completely different from planning assumptions. Constant delays accumulated into strategic failure. Fuel consumption spiraled out of control without corresponding territorial gains. American endurance impressed observers on both sides. Units that should have collapsed under pressure continued fighting. Proper artillery support made the difference repeatedly. 90mm guns transformed scattered strongpoints into formidable bastions. By late December, the German offensive had clearly stalled. American lines had bent under tremendous pressure, but never broken completely. Much of this resilience came from soldiers who stood firm in freezing conditions. The contribution of the 90mm guns was undeniable throughout. They had changed scattered resistance into organized defense. German spearheads never achieved the breakthrough they desperately needed. Every destroyed tank represented time that couldn't be recovered. German intelligence failures compounded strategic miscalculations throughout the offensive. Berlin's assumptions were built on outdated Allied strength estimates. Reconnaissance focused heavily on known Sherman production numbers. Tank destroyer battalion locations received careful attention. American tendency to repurpose weapons outside doctrinal roles was completely overlooked. German calculations treated the 90mm gun as purely an anti-aircraft system. Paper strength assessments ignored battlefield adaptability. This created dangerous blind spots in planning. False confidence spread through panzer crews based on these flawed estimates. German commanders assured their men that only British 17-pounder guns posed serious armor threats. American weapons were supposedly limited to lighter calibers. Advanced preparations reflected these miscalculations. Tank formations often attacked directly down narrow roads. Confidence replaced caution in tactical decisions. Only mines and artillery concentrations were considered serious obstacles. This overconfidence evaporated when burning hulks began appearing regularly. Logistical weaknesses made these intelligence failures catastrophic. The offensive was already an enormous gamble. Precise timetables were absolutely essential for success. Captured Allied fuel stocks had to supplement German supplies. Every unexpected delay multiplied consumption problems. 90mm guns destroying tanks at critical choke points worsened supply difficulties exponentially. Columns stalled behind wrecked vehicles while burning precious gasoline. Recovery equipment was limited and constantly exposed to ambush. Movement became increasingly difficult as delays accumulated. German diaries recovered after the battle reveal mounting frustration. Tank crews described being trapped on frozen roads. Destroyed vehicles blocked movement in both directions. Forward progress became impossible while retreat remained equally difficult. Psychological damage extended far beyond individual tank crews. Infantry supporting armored advances grew reluctant to press forward. Commanders had promised overwhelming momentum and easy victory. Reality delivered grinding attrition and inexplicable losses. Soldiers questioned assurances that triumph was imminent. Previously feared Tigers and Panthers were found abandoned. Their armor was pierced by weapons many had never encountered. Morale began cracking under the weight of broken promises. Strategic communication problems exacerbated tactical difficulties. Hitler's insistence on secrecy and centralized control prevented adaptation. Senior officers lacked accurate reports from frontline units. Communication breakdowns left battalions repeating the same mistakes repeatedly. Tactical adjustments that might have countered American innovations never reached forward commanders. Units continued sending armor into known ambush zones. 90mm batteries waited patiently, while German attacks proceeded predictably. Operational rigidity contrasted sharply with American flexibility. German doctrine emphasized concentrated armored thrusts exclusively. Americans quickly learned to disperse and reposition their guns. Adaptation occurred at the speed of battlefield necessity. By the time German tank commanders recognized the 90mm threat, defensive patterns had solidified. Opportunity for clean breakthrough had already passed. Multiple weapon systems integrated into coherent defensive belts. Concentrated armored assault became impossible without prohibitive losses. The miscalculation regarding American artillery versatility joined other critical errors. Poor weather reliance for air cover was one mistake. Underestimation of Allied logistical depth was another. Belief that surprise could compensate for material shortages proved false. Oversight of 90mm gun capabilities symbolized broader German problems. Enemy predictability was assumed rather than verified. American innovation was dismissed rather than studied. Battlefield adaptation was ignored rather than countered. Germany had expected opponents to remain doctrinally rigid. Instead, Americans demonstrated remarkable ability to innovate under pressure. Liability was transformed into decisive advantage. Defensive weapons became offensive game-changers. This adaptability extended beyond single-weapon systems. Entire tactical approaches evolved rapidly during combat. Combined arms integration improved daily under pressure. Innovation became systematic rather than accidental. When snow settled in January 1945, these intelligence failures were obvious. German expectations had proven completely wrong. American resilience exceeded all calculations. Artillery effectiveness surpassed German estimates by enormous margins. The Ardennes offensive collapsed under the weight of accumulated miscalculations. Destroyed tanks littered forest roads throughout Belgium. Abandoned vehicles marked the high-water mark of German ambitions. Intelligence failures had contributed directly to strategic defeat. January 1945 brought an end to Hitler's final gamble in the West. Snow continued falling over the Ardennes, but the battle was essentially finished. Shattered German formations retreated eastward. The landscape remained littered with destroyed tanks and abandoned equipment. American forces began tallying the enormous costs. German losses exceeded 600 tanks and assault guns during the operation. Many had fallen to 90mm fire at critical moments. After-action reports compiled by U.S. Army Ordnance revealed shocking penetration statistics. The weapon had pierced frontal armor on Panthers repeatedly. Even the dreaded Tiger the Soot succumbed under favorable conditions. Frontline soldiers who had believed only air power could halt German heavy armor were amazed. This revelation changed everything about American anti-tank doctrine. Immediate morale benefits were obvious throughout the ranks. Confidence returned to units that had faced overwhelming German armor. The myth of invincible panzers was shattered completely. Proper weapons and tactics could destroy any enemy vehicle. Long-term influence extended far beyond battlefield morale. American military leadership began rethinking anti-tank warfare fundamentals. The 90mm gun's success validated decisions to mount it permanently on armored vehicles. M36 Jackson tank destroyers already carried the system effectively. The M26 Pershing heavy tank would soon debut with the same weapon. Early 1945 combat trials proved the concept completely. High-velocity firepower matched or exceeded German capabilities. Medium-caliber weapons were clearly insufficient for modern warfare. This transition marked a fundamental shift in U.S. doctrine. Previous reliance on numerical superiority gave way to firepower matching. Technological competition replaced production advantages as the primary focus. Quality began balancing quantity in American planning. German reactions revealed their own surprises at American adaptability. Prisoner interrogations and captured documents showed genuine shock. Commanders admitted that unexpected anti-tank firepower had shattered Panzer unit confidence. Operational momentum evaporated under sustained pressure. For a military that prided itself on innovation, this was particularly bitter. The famous German 80mm gun had pioneered dual-role concepts. Anti-aircraft weapons becoming tank killers was originally a German innovation. By 1944, Americans had seized this tactical advantage. Ironic reversal highlighted broader themes of the war's final phase. Industrial flexibility combined with soldier ingenuity outmatched German design excellence. American gunners operating in freezing conditions proved decisive. Proper weapons employed creatively could blunt any offensive. Their actions delayed German spearheads long enough for reinforcements to arrive. This timing proved critical for encircling and defeating the entire offensive. Hitler's last Western gamble collapsed under accumulated delays. Artillery adaptation contributed directly to strategic victory. Post-war developments confirmed the 90mm gun's importance. It became standard armament on American heavy tanks through the 1950s. NATO doctrines incorporated lessons learned in the Ardennes forests. Training manuals emphasized weapon versatility over rigid specialization. Veterans who served these guns recalled the Ardennes as proof of adaptability's importance. Numbers and technology alone couldn't guarantee victory. Flexible thinking and innovative application often decided battles. Resourcefulness trumped raw power repeatedly. The 90mm story represents more than a tactical episode in military history. It demonstrates war's fundamentally unpredictable nature. Weapons designed for specific purposes can unexpectedly define victory in completely different roles. Innovation often emerges from desperation rather than planning. German forces learned painful lessons about underestimating opponent resourcefulness. Assumptions about enemy limitations proved catastrophically wrong. Rigid thinking created vulnerabilities that adaptive enemies exploited ruthlessly. Confidence without verification led to strategic defeat. Allied forces discovered evidence that resilience and innovation could withstand fierce assaults. Determination combined with creativity overcame seemingly impossible odds. Improvisation under pressure often succeeded where doctrine failed. Adaptation became survival, and survival evolved into victory. The Battle of the Bulge's legacy extends far beyond specific weapons or tactics. It proved that even the Reich's most desperate gambles could be defeated. American soldier ingenuity matched German engineering prowess. Flexibility conquered rigidity when circumstances demanded change. Winter forests of Belgium became testing grounds for military innovation. Anti-aircraft guns proved their worth against armored targets. Defensive weapons transformed into offensive advantages. Survival instincts evolved into systematic tactical improvements. This transformation from air defense to tank killing represents military adaptation at its finest. Circumstances demanded innovation, and soldiers responded brilliantly. Equipment designed for one war fought effectively in another. Necessity became the mother of tactical invention. The 90mm gun's performance during the Bulge stands as testament to American adaptability. It proves that rigid thinking loses to flexible application. Innovation emerges when survival depends on creative solutions. The right weapon at the right moment can change history's course. For Germany, it was a final reminder that underestimating opponents proves fatal. For America, it demonstrated that determination and ingenuity could overcome any challenge. The snows of the Ardennes witnessed both the Reich's last gasp and Allied resilience triumphant.